Like,
do. I'm dead.
okay, we're live. All right. Do you want to start us off?
You got it. You got it.
Okay. And welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am your host, Rachel Weaver, and I'm here with my other host,
Nate Bird, happy to be on the show again.
Yes, every week. So, we actually, if you are watching the video, you'll see that we have a new location we are in. We are recording in now, so that's fun.
Top secret Black Menaces studio bunker.
Yes, so cool. We're moving up in the world just a little bit, but slowly but surely. So, Nate, do you want to start us off today with our Menace moment?
Yeah, we got another Menace moment. We're super excited about it. So this one actually came through a DM on Instagram. Um, if you have Menace moments that you want to share, be sure to send them to us through our email account. It's blackmenacespodcast@gmail.com. But this comes from one of our awesome followers on Instagram. She said, I had a conversation with my grandpa the other day. He had questions about why I believe Black people should be given reparations. The best thing I could think of in the moment was to remind him that he received a GI Bill as a veteran that allowed him and his brother to get an education, while Black veterans were not given access to the GI Bill, and how that alone impacted generations of opportunity and wealth in families all over the country. He was
Period.
blown away. He lived then and didn't know this was being done. It was a small victory to me, as he has much, much, much more to learn.
Mm.
People talk about slavery, missed opportunities, etc., as forever ago, and therefore forever ago problems, but that's just not the case. And then she thanks us for what we're doing. Um, but
That
I love that.
I love that.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what we mean by Menace moment. It's not. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be anything huge. Just the small and simple things, right? Where she just pointed out to her grandpa, hey, this is something that you benefited from that people who did the same thing as you didn't get the chance to benefit from, and that makes a difference. And that was enough to kind of like change the way he thought about that one particular thing. So anything that you can do to just have like a little bit of a difficult conversation, anything you can do to just take it that much further, that's a Menace moment, and we
Yeah.
want to hear about them.
Or just not taking the easy way out, right? Because I bet the easy way out would have been like, that's just, my grandpa acting old, being the way he is, and just kind of moving on from it. Which is sometimes how I get, especially with people that, I've had similar conversations with several times. But that's what a true Menace is always standing up and trying to educate in the little or big ways that they can. So shout out to you. Thank you.
Amen to that.
Okay, so today we have some questions that we're answering that we have gotten in the email. And again, if you guys have questions about anything that you're curious about, questions about us or things going on in your life, email us at the email, which is blackmenacepodcast@gmail.com. So this question is subject questions from a white boy. I just thought that was so funny. I had to share it. But this person said, I'm trying to figure out where to start because they said a lot of things. Okay. Okay, they said, this is going to make me feel dumb that I have to ask, but when addressing POCs, specifically African Americans, I've used African American most of the time. Recently, I have been corrected when talking to some friends from Trinidad that they are not African American. I don't know what language to safely use without offending. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Do I just refer to them as my black friend? I'm from Atlanta and have used African American my whole life. So referring to someone who is black, yeah. Sorry if this question is weird or unnecessary. No, this is a great question. And this is a very common question. Nate, do you want to start us with anything?
Yeah, so I got to preface this one with a story, right? So growing up, I was in the third grade, and I was a little weird. I was a weird kid, right? I was real weird, real awkward.
I wanted to see weird Nate.
Listen, I was, well, that's a story for another time.
Okay.
I growled at a girl once in computer lab.
No.
I was a weird kid.
Okay, that is
We'll
weird.
talk
Not
about that
growling.
But yeah, so in the third grade, there was this kid. I was friends with him. He was from Turkey. And it was funny because he had a full mustache in the third grade, right?
Cool.
Just a hairy little boy.
Yeah.
But we were friends. We would hang out. We would play whatever. And one time we were sitting at lunch, and we were talking about something. I don't remember what the subject was. And this kid was like, we were joking around. I was like, oh, such and such, such and such. You're from Turkey. And he's like, well, you're black. And he didn't say it in a mean way. We were like joking, we were laughing, but
I'm
he said,
scared
"You're
where this is
black."
going.
And in my head, I thought that was racist, and so I like looked at him. I stopped and looked at him, and I just turned my back on him and I shunned him, right?
Oh my gosh.
And he did
No,
nothing
you
wrong.
called me black. How dare
And then I
you?
refused to talk to this boy, this poor boy, and
Oh,
he
our poor
was so
friends.
sad. He was sobbing. He was crying tears.
Oh,
It's like this was during lunch, right? So
man.
we came back from lunch, and I was just like I was upset with him because I thought that being called black was racist. Well, I guess I didn't even understand racism at the time, but I just thought that being called black was like a bad thing, right? It was wrong. And so yeah, he was so sad. He was crying, just like full on sobbing, snot coming down his face and everything. And then the teacher, I love this teacher. He was a dope teacher, Mr. Call. Mr. Call, if you hear this, hit me up. But he pulled us aside. He's like, "Yo, why are you crying?" And this kid explained. So I don't want to give his name out now. It probably doesn't matter. But he's asked him why he was crying. He's like, "Oh, they won't talk to me." And I was like, "He called me black." And Mr. Call, I don't know. I wish I could know what was going through his head at this time. I'm
Miss,
sure
wait, what's his race?
Mr. Call was a white man.
Okay.
Yeah, dope white man. But yeah, I wish I could know what was going through his head at the time. But I think he tried to explain that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but he couldn't really get that into my like little 9-year-old, 10-year-old head. And so then going home, I think I like partially resolved it or whatever. He stopped crying, and we kind of like hugged and made up or whatever. But then going home, my mom picked me up from school, and she's like, "How was your day?" And I was like, "Well, I lost a friend."
Oh my gosh, man. I was called black.
He called me black, and my mom was like, "That's not a bad thing."
Like, you are
you
black.
are black. I was like, "Wait, what?" So she explained to me, and so the next day, we go back, we're best of friends again, right?
Oh my god.
But I think about that often because now that's what I prefer to be called as black, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with saying with African American, but the thing is, I feel like African American takes away from people who are actually African American, meaning their families came from Africa more recently, and then they live in the United States. Because the term African American was coined or made popular, I guess, by Reverend Jesse Jackson, like back in the 70s or 80s, when he ran for president, and he came up with that term and said, black people, we need to call ourselves African Americans because our heritage, is in Africa. It was during kind of like Black Liberation movement, and so that became the term for quite a while. And I guess it's more considered the politically correct term, but I find that I prefer to be referred to as just a Black American because although my roots are in Africa, I've never been to Africa. I know nothing about Africa, other than what I read about or watch on TV or hear from people that I know who are from there. And so for me to consider myself an African American when the only place that I've ever called home or known is the United States, it feels a little bit odd to me. And so it kind of depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with saying either Black or African American.
So I'm gonna give you a quick sociology lesson, real quick. Bringing in my knowledge from
Come
my
on with the
major.
degree.
Okay, so there's a difference between what we're talking about here. It's a difference between ethnicity and race. So race is determined by what people perceive you as, right? So you can be ethnically one thing, but racially another, right? Like there are people who are racially white, but they are ethnically Hispanic or Latinx or whatever because they have ethnic backgrounds from other places, but they appear to be white, which is your race. And your race is really placed upon you by other people. Like you don't get to choose your race. You don't get to like say, oh, I'm going to opt into choosing to be perceived as white, or I'm going to opt in to be perceived as black, or whatever it may be, or Asian even, right? Sorry, your ethnicity is your culture, and that is something that you can voluntarily choose to be a part of, right? Like example, white people who are from other European countries, right? If you're German, you're racially white, but ethnically you're German. And so there are German cultures and traditions that you get to choose, right, if you want to participate and be a part of. And so although your race is one thing, your culture is totally different. And so the same thing can be said with Black people. And so most races have different sub ethnicities, right? Like Asian people, for example, someone can be Asian. Anyone who's Asian racially can be the whole continent of Asia, but how many cultures, ethnicities, are within that whole racial category, right?
Yeah,
And so with Black people, everybody who appears Black, who looks Black and has African origins of some sort, they are Black, and you can refer to them as Black. It is actually safer to refer to people as Black because most of the times you don't know someone's ethnicity unless you really know them personally. So when I'm referring to a group of Black people, no matter what, I don't know their ethnicity, I'm just going to say Black because that's safer. Now, when you know someone's ethnic group, that's when you can maybe be more specific and say, like your friend, they are not African American. African American, like Nate said, is the term that's been coined for Black people who are from America who don't necessarily know their African roots. Now, I have friends who are, their parents are immigrants from other African nations, and they're like second generation here. So I have friends who are like Nigerian, Ghanaian, Kenyan, but they are Nigerian Americans, Ghanaian Americans, because their ethnicity is whatever country they're from, but they're also American. And so that's how you can refer to people like that. That was a lot of information, but I feel like it's very valuable and explains the whole situation. And people just need to stop being afraid to call people Black. I think that that's what it is. People are afraid. They think it's politically incorrect, but it's actually incorrect to refer to someone as African American, and they could be whole. They're from Trinidad. They could be from Jamaica. They could be, I don't know, they could be from so many other places, and then that's worse than calling someone Black. That's my 2 cents on the issue. That's the scholarly little lesson there on the situation.
I love it. That's good. That's cool. I hadn't really thought about this. So I guess my wife, her family is all from Liberia. Mm-hmm. So she would be considered Liberian American, mm-hmm. right? But not necessarily African American.
Yeah, and I think this is a question that's going around the Black community right now, at least with Black Americans from what I've seen. Like Nate was kind of talking about, he prefers to be referred to as Black American. My brother is the same way. Me personally, I identify as African American because I think, for me personally, there's a lot of issues with Blackness and like trying to label Black as being American, because the race Black is becoming so diverse in America that I feel like it's not fair to other ethnic groups. This is how I feel, to label Black as equally American, right? That's why I'm like, you have to say Black Americans if you do refer to yourself that way, because coming to BYU, I've met so many Black people who are not African American, and I did not know that there were so many different types of Black people until I came to college. And so for me, I'm like, I'm African American, you are whatever, right? Like there's a lot of Haitian people who go to BYU too, like Black people, right? So they're Haitian, they're not African American. And so I think since what is included in Black is expanding, and like Black culture, to me, it's like Black American culture or African American culture. That's very separate from Ghanaian culture, Haitian culture, whatever, or if you're from the islands or something.
Mm-hmm. And
so
this is something I don't even know where it came from, but there's like a fear surrounding saying the word Black.
Yeah, there is.
And there's like a weird little, I don't even know what to call it, but there's some kind of weird taboo around white people saying the word Black, to the point where every time they say it, it just sounds weird coming out. Like I remember, for instance, when we did interviews with like Fox News, like local Fox channels and like ABC 13 or whatever, all those different channels, KUTV.
Flex us real quick.
Google us.
Yeah.
But I remember when we do those interviews and I would watch them on TV or like watch them on YouTube or whatever, the way they say BYU's Black menaces, and they always say Black so like weird.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know, it just feels like
it's a fear.
Yeah,
among white people.
There's definitely a fear around saying that. And maybe at one time there was a taboo surrounding saying the word Black.
I think it was.
Yeah, there was a movement to say African American. I think that's what we've grown up with. But now that's changing because we're trying to be more inclusive of all ethnicities. And so Black American refers specifically to Black people who are from America. So don't be afraid to say Black. It's not offensive. Nope. It's not a bad thing.
I mean, because now every 1 in 5 Black people are immigrants or have immigrant parents, like 2 generations away. So it's becoming very diverse, Black, like the racial group of Black.
All right, so Black is quickly becoming the more appropriate term until you get to know someone's ethnicity, and then you can, if you want to refer to them as Haitian American or Nigerian American or Irish American, Scottish American, English American, whatever.
And also, it's like Nate said, every Black American, African American has different feelings about what they want to be referred to as. I know lots of Black Americans who don't want to be referred to as African American because they don't feel connected to their African roots, which is fine. Like I respect, I understand it. So I think that that's also important to note that it even varies among African Americans how they feel about it.
Now, with that in mind, do be careful in what context you use the word Black, because, for example, there's a video. It's an old video that's floating around on the internet where this kid was in line at a fast food restaurant or something like that, and the guy was in front of him. It was a Black man in front of him, and for some reason he had made him upset, and so this white kid was like, I'm not even gonna say the N-word, you freaking black guy. And then the guy picked him up and like threw him over the fast food counter. It's a hilarious video, so check it out.
Seen this.
But the way in which he used it there, obviously that was hostile. So as long as you have good intentions, you're good. Just don't use it with hostile.
I mean, not trying to. Are you racializing them in a negative way?
Right.
Is it because of identification purposes, or are you trying to, like the way he was saying it was obviously negative?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You said it better.
Oh, stop. I got on my little sociology teacher's assistant voice, and my brain has just kept going because
caught upon the power of the
degree. Literally.
Also, shout out to Rachel graduating next week?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Applause. All right.
Nate, you want to take us with our second question for today?
Let me pull it up here. Which one was it?
Hold on.
Oh.
Yep. No.
Oh, not that one. Okay, got it.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So this person says, we're just going to keep it anonymous. This person said they're a former member of the church, and they appreciate the light that we have shed on some of the more problematic and harmful LDS teachings. And then said, I'm skipping through. They just okay. So basically, they just asked, have we engaged much with Mormon apologetics, and what are our thoughts on the Midnight Mormons? I had to be honest, I had to Google the Midnight Mormons.
Me too. I
don't know what that is, right? And then when I Googled them, I didn't find much. I found a Twitter account, a YouTube account. Essentially, the Midnight Mormons are a group of
go ahead.
Mormon intellectuals, I suppose. They argue the finer points of doctrine in the church, and I guess debate some of those points, and then debate some of the, I guess, anti-Mormon things that people say, or like the issues that people have with the church. They kind of debate, or they're apologetics, but they say they're not apologetics. I don't really know how to explain it. But basically, they kind of debate the finer points of doctrine in the church and all that kind of stuff.
That people normally use as reasons for why the church isn't true.
I have not had very much interaction with the Midnight Mormons. I don't really know.
I've never seen their content or listened to it.
And so, as far as having an opinion on them, I don't really have an opinion. Maybe I'll formulate one in the future. But to me, it's just y'all do what you want to do. We'll do what we want to do. And as far as engaging with apologetics, no, because our job is not to debate anyone or challenge anybody's, beliefs, unless, of course, they are incorrect or deny someone's humanity. In that case, that is our job to challenge those. But we don't spend time arguing the points of LDS doctrine or anything like that, because that's not our focus, and we're not associated with the church or with BYU or anything like that in any way. We're independent of all of that, and our goal is just to spread awareness, facilitate difficult conversations, and create change at predominantly white institutions.
Yeah, and also our content isn't cornered. What's the word? It's not limited to just LDS issues or issues within the LDS church. Yes, that is some of the content we make and we talk about, but just like this question we just had before this, that has nothing to do with the church, right? That has everything to do with just race and people. And so, and also my personal opinion on just like apologetics and all of that is, I grew up in my home ward on the south side of Chicago. It's a lot of very intellectual people in the church. So like University of Chicago, it's like the law school is like number 3. The business school is like tied number 1 with Harvard. very intellectual people come to my ward to get their degrees, like their post-grad degrees. And so those are the people that I kind of learned the gospel from. Those are my teachers in seminary, those are my young women's leaders, those were my everything, Sunday school teachers. And so I think I kind of know a lot of people who like apologetics, like people who are really intellectual in the church like that. Sometimes they need apologetics to kind of make the church make sense almost when they have questions. And so I've actually listened to a lot of content, read content from apologetics, and I don't dislike it. I just think that um, sometimes apologetics are too caught up on the details and less about people's experience. Like I got into an argument actually a couple weeks ago with a friend, not a week ago, like months ago, and we're talking about like the church and being black, and they were just saying all types of crazy stuff that at the end of the day, no matter what he was saying, it doesn't matter if I as a black person walk into a ward and I'm the only person. Okay, so it doesn't matter how much stuff you try to come up with, of why this is true, why that isn't true, and he did it then, and he did it now. At the end of the day, I go into a ward and I'm the only black person, and people are culturally deaf in the church. So all this other stuff you're saying really doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my personal opinion. They're not bad. I think I just don't. They're sometimes defending stuff that they can't really defend.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's what it comes down to. Some things you can argue all you want, but it's just wrong at the end of the day. So that's as much as we're gonna say on that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I figured out this question, so it's in two parts. It's two different emails from the same person. That's why it didn't make sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna read this question too, because I think this is a really good one. So this person says, I recently moved and I feel like a lot of people in my new ward are a little too religious. I also recently found out that I am asexual and I don't know what they'll think of me. My older sister is the only one I've told, and she treats me no different than she did before. But I don't know if that will be the case for everyone, especially the other people in my ward. And for those of you who don't know, a ward in the Mormon Church is basically just a congregation based on like geographical location. So however many members of the LDS Church there are within a certain geographical region, they make up one congregation called a ward. So she's saying she doesn't know um, how to feel about this situation or how people will treat this person. And so they say, how does one cope with being around people who are constantly, unknowingly insulting people like myself and my friends? Right? It makes
Okay,
sense now.
we
I
had
get it.
this question was sent in 2 emails, and
Uh-huh.
we were looking at it for so long, and we were not understanding. Okay,
Yeah.
now I get it. Ooh.
So basically, this person has a part of themselves that they feel that they can't share with everyone,
Mhm.
and they go to church and they experience a lot of, I guess, microaggressions or treatment that makes them feel unwelcome, right? And so the question is,
And these people don't know that this person is a
yeah,
part of said community,
right,
and they're making comments or whatever.
mm.
Oh, I see.
And so they're trying to. So this person's asking, how do you cope with people who are doing and saying things that kind of are insulting to you and may not realize it?
Mm.
And I think that that is a tough one
Very tough.
because you don't want to fault them, but at the same time you kind of have to, because the way that people, there are a lot of people who when something affects them, it changes the way that they see the world. I know that was definitely true for me in a lot of things. When something began to affect me, that's when I kind of thought about it more often, when it became more important in my life. And I'm trying to get to a point where that's not the case, where things that are important to other people can also be important to me without it having to affect me. But that's not the case for a lot of people. And so in this instance, I think that there has to be a level of compassion, there has to be a level of respect, but there also has to be a level of awareness of self. You have to kind of gauge, okay, who can I be around who I have, who I know or feel is going to accept me for who I am, who I know and feel is going to not judge me, based on who they believe me to be, but rather judge me on who I am, right? I mean, it sounds like for this person, they told their older sister, and their older sister was someone that they could trust, and obviously that paid off because this person doesn't treat them any differently. Um, but yeah, I think as far as coping goes, man, that's tough.
Yeah.
You got anything to say about that one?
No, I mean, I just don't have any personal experience because I feel like all of my experiences that I've had have been pretty like, what I identify like what I identify with any of my marginalizations is very obvious. Like I'm a woman and I'm Black. Um, I think it's really hard, especially in the church, because um, there's just there's certain things that are just more difficult. And yeah, I don't have any advice. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Nate, do you? I'm like, I should have prepared more for this question.
So let me think about this one. So, like Rachel said, the way that we walk through the world is very different. It's not something that we can necessarily hide. I can't hide the fact that I'm a Black man. Rachel can't hide the fact that she's a Black woman. Um, and so those things, it becomes very obvious what people think of us or how they feel about us in a lot of situations. And microaggressions
and they can't like hide if they don't like a Black person or they don't understand something.
Right.
It's like we see it.
Yeah, it's very visible. But it's different because the way that somebody feels about a member of the LGBTQ community can change really quickly if it's someone that they know. Unfortunately, in a lot of instances, that's not the case, and the thoughts and the ideas that they have beforehand remain the same. Man, as far as coping with that goes, I think you really just have to be very careful who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you get to know the people that are around you and kind of figure out who is most likely to accept you for who you are. And those things will come out in other things. The things that they say, whether it's about the LGBT community or whether it's about other marginalized communities, will tip you off. The way that they just treat individuals in general, when people are very genuine, you can always tell, right? When someone's just a genuine good person, that always comes out in the way that they act. And so I think really just kind of being careful who you surround yourself with is probably the best advice I can give you. And just don't surround yourself with negativity. Focus on positive things. Surround yourself with positive people. And if that means this could be tough for some people to hear, but if that means separating yourself from your ward, maybe finding a better ward, or just finding a different congregation to meet in that makes you feel more welcome, more accepted, then that's very important. Because going somewhere where you don't feel welcome is detrimental to your mental health, your emotional health, and it can even be detrimental to your physical and spiritual health too. So be sure to just surround yourself with as much positivity as possible to kind of ward off the negative effects of people around you.
Yeah, and I think for me, with Nate, protect your peace, protect you, because at the end of the day, like you need to be okay with taking space for yourself because you need to protect you at all costs. I look back at my time at BYU and in the church, and I think a lot of the times I put myself in situations where I felt like I had to be there when I really didn't, and that it's just not necessary. That pain is not needed. And if you can, always be aware of what you're feeling and what you're going through and move accordingly. Like Wendy said, that's the biggest piece of advice I can give, because at the end of the day, you matter, your health matters, your peace matters, and going to said congregation or to said church where people are making you feel like you can't be you and you're afraid to communicate about who you are to them because of that, that's not healthy either. So yeah, and that takes balance and that takes time to figure out too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
that's all we have for today, guys.
That's it.
Make sure to send us any questions you have at the email blackmenacepodcast@gmail.com, because we love to answer any questions for you.
Be sure to check out the description on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all those different podcast platforms, because they'll tell you what the email is too, because we mess it up every single time.
We do.
But be sure to send us your minutes, moments, and any questions that you might have. And be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah, our main platform.
Yeah.
And don't forget to, if you want, sign to the Patreon, the Menace Society. We are posting a lot more on there, and we do have exclusive content and exclusive discounts.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a member of the Menace Society, shoot us an email. Let us know what you want to see in there, because we are still learning. Believe it or not, we're still very new to this. We started in February, right? And this podcast has been going. We're on episode 10. That's
which
crazy.
is crazy to think about,
But that's
honestly.
still just 2.5 months. So we're very
Yeah.
new to all of this, and we need y'all's help to make it what you want it to be
Mhm.
and what we want it to be. So yeah, be sure to hit us up. And with that, never forget,
Always be a menace.
always,
See you guys next week.
outro music fading away.
Let me text Kylie and then.